All right, well, today we're going to be changing the alternator and the Serpentine Belt on the 2020 Palisade. So believe it or not, we still have this. And I actually found where some of the oil's leaking, so I'll show you that as well. But let me go ahead and show you the tools you're gonna need and the hardware to get this job done. All right, so stuff needed for this project. Obviously, you're gonna need a new alternator and a new Serpentine Belt. I'll leave some links in the description to where I got them. I get them from an OEM supplier for Hyundai. Need some gloves, optional, but I recommend them. And then we're gonna need a 12 millimeter and a 14 millimeter wrench, a whacking thing, because, you know, New England cars, a ratchet, some picks, some lights, eye protection, always a good idea. Then we're gonna need a 19 millimeter short for the tensioner. We're gonna need a 12 millimeter, 14, and a 10 millimeter, you know, good old 10 millimeter. And then lastly, we're going to need a Serpentine Belt tool, and one bonus thing, a pry bar, which I highly recommend, although it's not required. And then a creeper if you have one, because who wants to be on the ground in 12 or 14 degree weather? All right, so first step is to jack up the car, and you don't have to go too high because you're actually gonna be working in a pretty nice little cleared area, you know, but just have some 3-ton jack stands, and then I have the jack just as extra insurance. And then if I go ahead on the other side, you probably can see where this is going. I have another jack stand there. So that gets the vehicle off the ground. Honestly, you could do this on the ground if you wanted to. You would not be able to use a creeper. So I've received a few questions on where I get my manuals for when I'm working on these cars. And here's a perfect example of here's all the steps in text form for the project we're doing here. And I'm also using this in the video as well. But I'm actually getting these from a company called eManual Online, and I will drop a link in the description where you can go ahead and download these as well. All right, first step is to go ahead and pop the hood, and then what you're going to do is you're going to want to remove this air box. So you have 2 clips here. Just use a pick, or actually better to use a clip removal tool if you have one. Once that's completed, we're going to go ahead and remove this battery. And basically, I mean, this is really self-explanatory, but you basically just have 2 terminals on one on either side. And then if I come down here, you're gonna see that there is a bracket right here. Once that's complete, you go ahead and remove the battery. And pro tip, do not lock your car before you remove the battery, because there's really no way to unlock it without going through the manual steps. So don't do that. Once your battery is removed, the next step is to go over here, and you wanna disconnect the alternator cable. So let me go ahead, I'm actually gonna highlight it as well, but it's right here, it's under this boot. And then you're going to see the connector right next to it. It is easier, it's actually right there, I'm pointing at it. It's a little bit of a struggle from doing it from the top, but I'm gonna be honest with you, it's a lot harder to do it from the bottom. So try to get it done here if you can. And now this next step I'm going to show you here, but we're not gonna do it just yet. But in order to remove the alternator, you're gonna have these 14 millimeter bolts right here. There's 4 of them. However, before you do that, you have to remove the Serpentine Belt. Okay, camera angles are gonna get a little crazy here, so I do apologize, but I'm trying to do the best I can without a lift. Next step is to remove this Serpentine Belt. In order to do that, you're gonna hit the tensioner right there with your Serpentine Belt removal tool. Pull it towards the front of the vehicle. I'm gonna be honest with you, this is really, really tough if you don't know what you're doing or you don't have a ton of strength. So work slow, do your best, have someone help you if you must, but you wanna make it so that you can get this belt off. Obviously, you cannot remove anything else if you don't take the belt off. You're gonna go ahead and disconnect the AC compressor. However, you wanna make sure that you do not mess with the lines, and I'm gonna explain to you why in just a minute, but you're going to remove these bolts. You're going to find 4 of them in total. Do not remove the little bolt that is on the hard line. It's hard to see right here, but it's right up there. Do not touch that small bolt. I did, and I had to have the system recharged. I'll go into detail about that in a bit. Then as far as for bottom here, you want to go ahead and remove this oil level sensor. And then you're going to find there's a total of 4 connectors. There's this one here, we're calling it a connector. There's one right under here that's for the AC compressor. And then there's the one for the alternator, which you probably already should have taken off. And there's one more that I cannot see right now. Apologies, it's not actually a It's part of this blue. It's just attached to the AC compressor in 2 places. So 4 disconnect points, 3 connectors. Okay, after you disconnect those 4 12mm bolts, what you want to go ahead and do is lower the AC compressor, rest it on the frame and the oil pan. So, you know, I mentioned that plug right there, that connector. Make sure you take that connector off, because when you start to back this off, get it off of this assembly here, it's going to want to break that, and that's going to be an additional cost plus possibly a mess. Next step is to remove the alternator, and it'll be 2 12mm bolts, one on the bottom and one on the top. All right, now that you have your alternator out, you want to keep note of 2 things. 1, those bolts, you're going to reuse them, so don't throw this thing away. And 2, that idler pulley over on the left there, you're going to reuse that as well, unless you purchased a new one or it just happened to come in your kit. Inspect it, or honestly, if you're placing this order, maybe just get a new one. I'm going to take this off and inspect it. Removal is pretty straightforward. Just grab yourself a pick or something, and you want to pull this cap off. And trying to do this one-handed is quite the challenge. All right, once that cap's off, you're going to head and grab yourself a 14mm and go ahead and take this bolt off. It might be a little tight, so you might have to use some air or power or something, but if not, just basically need to get this off so we can get this idler pulley off this alternator. All right, and I did end up using an impact because this is probably put on with more force than hand tight. The pulley is installed on the new one, so you don't have to take that off, but if you did, you just remove this yellow cap, and same deal, probably going to be a different size socket, but you just use some air or power tool and get that off as well. You'll see that I have a nice open cavity to be able to put the new alternator. So installation is the same as removal in reverse. All right, with the magic of editing, you can now see that the alternator is in. That's 2 14mm bolts. Next step is to put the AC compressor back up, and that is 4 12mm bolts. And then just make sure that you have all your plugs. So there should be a plug on the alternator, a plug on the compressor, and then right there, I believe, is an oil level switch or sensor or something of those lines. Make sure that that's plugged in as well, and make sure that your zip ties are connected, and make sure that nothing is touching the extremely hot or will be hot exhaust. Then the last step of this is to reroute the Serpentine Belt, the new one, and I'm gonna head and put a description up on the screen right now to show you the routing. Although quite honestly, it is almost impossible to screw up. Just take your time, especially if you've never done it before, and just quickly go through the process. Make sure you've done everything, especially if you're a DIYer. If you're watching this video, you probably are. If you are a mechanic, then please be gentle, but do tell me if I missed any steps or if you would have done something different. I love to learn. So real quick, you can actually see that this oil pan is most likely leaking oil, and it's why you saw it on the engine belly cover that I showed briefly there. Yeah, it seems like maybe the oil pan is part of the leaking problem. There's a couple more places here that it's dripping a little bit. And then if I go to the drain plug, you can see a little bit there as well. And then it's funny, if I flip the camera upside down, you can actually see a little bit of oil spillage on the subframe with some blow-by. So that's just awesome. Thanks, Hyundai. All right, thanks for real life getting in the way. I'm finishing up this project up at night. So I ended up getting a new battery. Make sure that you get the same one. Deal with the core, all that good stuff. So now, after I've already shown you the belt and everything, so now all I have to do is right down, let's see, come on, light. Work with me. Right there, I need to, actually, hold on, there we go. Right there, I need to connect the alternator cable. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. All right, now that the alternator terminal is connected, go ahead and connect your battery. But before you do that, remember that this battery actually has a bracket to hold it down. And then you want to put the shield around it, which I don't know exactly what this does. Maybe it keeps the temperature regulated. I'm not sure, but make sure you put that on as well. All right, so this battery lockdown is a 12mm. All right, then go ahead and throw on your protector here. And then lastly, your battery terminals. And your battery terminals are a 10mm socket. Now, in regards to putting on the positive terminal, some cars will cause their alarm to go off because of the radio immobilizer. So just go ahead and make sure that you have your keys at the ready so you can hit that unlock button so you don't annoy your neighbors and also scare the crap out of yourself. All right, once that's complete, your real final step, aside from putting this the protector on the bottom of your vehicle, is to put the airbox on. That is the complete install. Aside from that bottom pan I mentioned, that's all of my trim clips and bolts for that. Nothing else here, no alternator bolts or anything. Everything is in place and installed. Now it's just a matter of starting up the vehicle and checking everything out. All right, and after some trial and error and figuring out what I'm doing to both create this video for you guys and also my first time doing it, everything is running. And if I go ahead and go to the instrument cluster, you'll see the most important thing is that there is no battery light, and there is a trunk light, obviously, or hood light, obviously, because it's still open, as you can very clearly tell. However, no check engine light and no low battery light. So I'm gonna let this run and come up to temp, and we should be good to go. All right, and just like that, this baby's got 80,000 miles on it. I would say overall it has been fairly reliable. I think an alternator going out isn't probably the worst thing that could happen. The oil issue is certainly a concern, but at any rate, I will say that this repair is done. I'm on my test drive right now, just making sure everything's good before I let my wife drive it, and I think we're good to go. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions on the install, let me know. Help as best I can. Definitely not a mechanic, but I do play one on YouTube. If you're new here, please subscribe, like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.